Hello again, everyone. I am Chris Scher, and this is the Citizen Sports Weekly for Friday, February 5th, 2021. Robert Harding and Justin Ritzel are with us. And also we have a very special guest, Bob Socci, the voice of the New England Patriots, Auburn native, and of course, my fellow class of 1985 graduate. Bob, it is great to see you. How are you doing, sir?
Well, Chris, I'm doing great, and hopefully my kids are going to cooperate. I've got my two young ones here in the home office, so to speak, finishing up their remote schooling today. And it's good to be with you. And I know they sent out their best to Uncle John and Aunt Tina and all the other Socis that are in the area in Central New York. And Colvin's too, speaking of my in-laws.
Yes. Yeah. And this video is obviously a special one because we have the Super Bowl coming up this coming Sunday. Bob has broadcast a few Super Bowls, which is extraordinary. And unfortunately, the New England Patriots are not in the Super Bowl, but Tom Brady is. So there is a little bit of and obviously Rob Gronkowski. So there is some Patriot ties with the Buccaneers and everything. So we're going to discuss the game a little bit. We're going to make some predictions. We're going to talk about some NFL topics, and then we're going to ask some questions of Bob about the NFL, the Patriots, really anything football related. So let's get to the game itself, and I'll just give my preview and prediction. So, you know, this is going to be a great football game. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You have two of the greatest quarterbacks in the game period right now. Obviously, Tom Brady is the greatest of all time for the number of Super Bowl wins, the numbers he's put up. And Patrick Mahomes obviously is en route to, you know, coming close to what Brady is doing in such a short period of time. You know, Tampa Bay has a great defense, no doubt about that. When these teams played each other earlier in the season, back in November, it was a 27-24 Kansas City victory. Kansas City is favored by 3. So I really feel that in this game, you've got to go with the best quarterback, and that's Mahomes. I think he's going to be the major reason why Kansas City wins this game. I believe they covered the 3. I think they're going to win by 6, maybe 7 points. I think the game will be around a 30-23 game. So if you're going with the totals, it's 56. I guess I'm going with the under here. But I just think Patrick Mahomes is head and shoulders the best quarterback in the game. He will make the difference. Obviously, Kelsey and Hill are going to be huge. And I just think Tom Brady is due for – I mean, he had a bad game against Green Bay, obviously, those 3 interceptions. I just think that the Buccaneers been able to take advantage of, I don't want to say a weak schedule in the postseason. I mean, they had Washington at the first game. New Orleans, you know, they turned over the football quite a bit, and it just seems like Green Bay could not get on track offensively. So Kansas City's a much better team than those 3 teams. That's why I'm going with the Chiefs, the cover, and with the under. Robert, your thoughts on the Super Bowl?
Well, Chris, as you know, you have a 1-game lead on me in the pick 4. So that did influence my decision here. I knew that you were going to be a sucker and go for the Chiefs anyway. Look, you know, in all seriousness, this is going to be an interesting matchup in the trenches. The Chiefs' offensive line is missing both their starting tackles. That's huge in this game when you're talking about going up against 2 of the better pass rushers in the league. You know, you got Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett on the other side. So they could pose some problems. I mean, the good thing for the Chiefs is that Mahomes can move around, but both of those guys can they certainly have the athleticism to get to him. So I think that's really going to be the difference in this one, that, you know, just like they did to Aaron Rodgers. You know, Aaron Rodgers, you know, I don't think he's as athletic as Mahomes, but certainly, you know, he's a guy that can move around too, and they sacked him, I believe, 5 times. You know, if they can make life just even a little bit miserable for Mahomes, I think they win this one. And look, they got Brady. And, you know, I don't have to tell Bob about Tom Brady, of course, but, you know, Brady, he knows how this goes. And I think he'll play well enough. You know, he made a few mistakes in the game against the Packers, but the defense bailed him out there. I think he'll play well enough to win this game, and I'm taking the Bucs. You know, it's you know, partly because of the pick 4, but also because I think that this game poses some problems for the Chiefs, and you know, the Chiefs really won this game the last time because of Tyreek Hill, and so if the Bucs can shut him down even a little bit, at least not let them get 263 yards this time. I think that they win this game.
Bob, I'm sorry, Robert, I knew you were going to pick against who I was picking. I knew you were going to do that. So we're either we're going to tie or I'm going to have a 2-game victory. So that's nice.
Whatever.
You got to make it. All right, Justin, your pick for the Super Bowl.
Well, let's hope I don't have barking dogs interrupting my commentary here. I look at this one of two ways. The Chiefs played the Bucs earlier this season, and I think it was a 27-24 game, but that was very deceptive. Tyreek Hill had about 500 yards in the first half. The Chiefs went up early, and the Bucs were totally outclassed. They got some late scores to make the final score respectable, but it was not ultimately that close of a game. And what we learned from the conference championships is that both the teams that won during the regular season were able to duplicate that when the teams met again in the postseason. So I think if you're a Chiefs fan, you should be encouraged by the fact that your team totally kicked the Bucs' butt back, what was it, week 10, week 11, around there. On the other hand, Mr. Tom Brady, well, he's got a little bit of experience facing the defending Super Bowl champ in his career. 2001, they faced the St. Louis Rams back then. Patriots were heavy underdogs, and they won. 2014, they were facing the defending Super Bowl champs from Seattle. Tom Brady was able to win that game. So I like to poke fun at Tom Brady. I've certainly done my fair share of that this year. But I'll take the 3 points, and I'll take the Buccaneers, really mainly for the reason Robert outlined earlier. I'm a little worried about that Kansas City offensive line. Tampa showed what they can do to a weakened offensive line a couple weeks ago against Green Bay. I don't see any reason why they can't duplicate that in the Super Bowl.
Bob, you don't have to give us a prediction unless you want to, but what are your thoughts about the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think you all make valid points. I think certainly for me, my heart is with Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. I can't root against those guys. And when you talk about my experience calling Super Bowls and Brady on that stage, I've called 4 Super Bowls. The Patriots were 3-1 in those games. And in the one loss, he passed for 505 yards against the Eagles. And you're right, Chris, he didn't play well against Green Bay in the second half. The Buccaneers really were fortunate with the mistakes they made in the second half. And obviously the Packers were complicit too. The breakdown in the second quarter, in the final seconds of that opening half, missed opportunity for an interception. And then the defensive call by Mike Pettin before Scotty Miller catches the touchdown pass from Brady in the final seconds of the second quarter. To me, that's where the game really was decided. And Brady did not play well in the second half. And I think if he has a similar showing on Sunday against the Chiefs, it's going to be a long, long day for the Buccaneers. But I don't anticipate that because he's Tom Brady. And you guys have all touched on it. He's been on the stage and shined on this stage numerous times. I think the Buccaneers have a team that can affect Kansas City offensively. You've already noted the matchup with their pass rushers, particularly on the edges against the offensive tackles for Kansas City. In addition, Vita Vea on the inside makes a big difference for Tampa Bay. I think the Bucs can also run the ball, flipping it over to their offensive line against Kansas City. And I think Tampa Bay's linebackers, Devin White makes a huge difference for them. Now, Todd Bowles is a very aggressive coordinator. And will he blitz a lot in this game? I'm not so sure because Mahomes carves up blitzes. But I'd like to see Tampa Bay in this game be aggressive at the line of scrimmage with the Kansas City receiver. It's hard to you can't stop Tyreek Hill. You can't stop Travis Kelce. But to me, the best opportunity to beat the Chiefs and that offense is to at least disrupt their timing. So to me, I would expect guys like Cam Davis at cornerback, some of the other players in the secondary for the Buccaneers to try to be physical at the line of scrimmage and double team, bracket Hill, and not let them run free through his zone. I thought Buffalo and Cleveland had very passive game plans, particularly early in the Buffalo game against Kansas City's offense. It's really a matter of pick your poison. The thing about the Chiefs, too, is Mahomes is such a great facilitator of Andy Reid's offense because he throws it to everybody. And now I guess Sammy Watkins is a question mark for the game now, but you've got Watkins, you've got Hill, you've got Kelce, you have Hardman. Demarcus Robinson is a guy he will throw to. He'll throw to Williams out of the backfield. So it's an offense I don't think you can stop for 60 minutes. San Francisco found that out last year. The Chiefs are never out of a game, but I do think the Buccaneers can certainly affect them and keep themselves in the game. But it comes down to two. How can Brady play mistake free? And he's shown that he can. I do think Kansas City's defense, though, is better than people typically give them credit for. I think their secondary is a lot better than the secondaries Brady faced as a Patriot against the Chiefs in the experience I've had, whether the regular season or the playoffs, the AFC Championship in 2018, or in last year's game. Snead makes a big difference back there. Matthews playing at an incredibly high level. I think Spagnuolo usually has a very good game plan, particularly against Brady, and in his experience with the Giants and as well the Chiefs has frustrated Tom and the Patriots in the past, going up against them. I think it's going to be a great game. My heart says Bucks, and despite all the things I laid out with regards to Tampa Bay, I'm not a betting man. I still would not bet, though, if I were, against Kansas City. I just think they're so phenomenal offensively. There's so much skill there. One thing to keep in mind, Butker's a bit of a wild card for Kansas City, and the conditions are not going to be great on Sunday, given the forecast, if that holds true. Butker is outstanding as a field goal kicker, but you look at his numbers when it comes to PATs. He's missed a lot of them this year. And it could come down to some mistakes in the kicking game. I think Kansas City is the better special teams overall, despite the fumble last week, the muffed punt. But, we'll see what happens as well with Suckup and Butker, are the two place kickers in this game.
No, that's some good points, Bob. Again, thanks. So we're going to move on to another NFL topic. Last weekend, there was a huge, shocking trade. I don't think anybody saw coming this early. I mean, obviously the new league season hasn't even started yet because we're not even done with the old one. But the Rams and the Lions swapped quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford going from Detroit to Los Angeles, Jared Goff vice versa. It's obviously a bombshell trade. Bob, what are your thoughts about what happened between these two teams trading quarterbacks like they did?
Well, it's a remarkable price, certainly, that I think the Rams paid to get Stafford. Of course, they did that in part because they had to get the price of Jared Goff and his contract off of their books. And Detroit and the new general manager, Brad Holmes, has familiarity with Goff. Holmes was the director of college scouting when the Rams picked Goff number one. And I've not been a big fan of Jared Goff. I thought, the Patriots kind of exposed him in Super Bowl 53. I thought they also exposed Sean McVay, though, in that game. And, we saw Goff against the Patriots this year. I wasn't at the stadium because we were calling road games remotely during the pandemic. But I think Goff is a quarterback who, in that offense, as the last few years have gone along, that McVay has tried to manage to the point where he doesn't make mistakes to beat the Rams. And, you look at Matthew Stafford, he's kind of got a gunslinger's mentality in a lot of ways as a quarterback. He'll take some chances, great arm. He's tough in terms of his physical durability. I know he was injured a lot last year, but he bounced back. And, the Lions have not had a running game throughout his entire career. They're, statistically, he's among the better quarterbacks in the league throughout his tenure. But, to me, I do think it's fascinating. I think that, it's one of a number of quarterback trades or signings we're going to see where some big names change locations. I was surprised that the Rams were in it as hot and heavy as they were right away. But maybe there was an inkling when Les Snead was non-committal to Jared Goff a few days prior to that, LA's all in, and they got to be, they got to go all in. I do think that, with their defense, there's a chance it regresses next year. And to me, a lot of people say, well, one of the things the Rams have been able to overcome is a lack of number one draft picks because they do so well in later rounds in the draft. Well, is the reason for that the guy who's now in Detroit is the general manager, the past director of college scouting for the Rams, Brad Holmes, or how much of a role did he play in that? I think it's one of those moves that really could pay dividends, big dividends for the Rams in the next year or two. But if it doesn't, I think it's a move that a lot of people are going to look back on and say, what were they thinking? Because their last number one pick was Jared Goff, and their next number one pick won't be until like 2024. So it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Kind of reminds me of the old George Allen days when he was coaching. He'd always would trade his draft picks for veterans and things like that. He never had a first round draft pick when he was coaching back in Washington back in the 70s. Robert, your thoughts on the Stafford Goff trade?
Yeah, I think it's certainly an upgrade for the Rams at that position. And I think with Sean McVay and that offense, he wanted a quarterback that could do more than just throw play action passes, and who has that experience to read defenses more. This was one of the knocks on Goff, is that he just doesn't have that skill set necessarily. He's not good at reading defenses. He's mainly a play action passer because he doesn't have that kind of decision making. So Stafford is really a huge upgrade for them. And I agree with Bob that with the defenses from year to year. I mean, we saw this with the Bills this year, that the defense kind of took a step back. You could see that happening with the Rams, even though they have tons of talent, obviously, on that side of the ball. So having that ability on offense could negate some of that regression. So that's huge for them. But the Lions, as the saying goes, you gotta draft well, and so that's really up to them. But they have quite a haul here, and I think that could be huge for them. I mean, Goff is Goff. I mean, I don't think he's going to make a huge difference for this team, but the draft picks might. And we'll see what they do with those. But just an incredible trade, and really kicks off what's going to be I think a game-changing offseason in a lot of ways with the quarterback position. We know the Deshaun Watson situation. Who knows what happens with your pal Tua there, Chris? If there's a trade there, maybe Tua's going elsewhere. I mean, who knows? Obviously you've got some other some other chatter happening about quarterbacks around the league. Derek Carr has been mentioned, among others. So, and who knows what happens with Ritz's pal Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he's going anywhere, but you never know. We'll see what happens in this game. But yeah, it's going to be a fun offseason, and certainly the Rams and Lions got it off to a hot start.
Justin, this impacts your team a little bit, playing in the NFC North with the Lions. But what are your thoughts about Detroit getting Jared Goff? Justin,
let me be clear off the top here. I think this is a worthwhile trade for both sides. But as you guys mentioned, I am a Packers fan. You guys like to bust my balls and call me the NFC North expert, which I take a lot of pride in. So I've seen a lot of Matt Stafford over the years. He's been the Lions quarterback since 2009. And I said this to Robert via tweet the night the trade happened. I said, not once in my time as a Packers fan facing Matt Stafford for the last 12 years have I ever been afraid of that guy. I think he's very talented, but I also think that, he's had his fair share of pass catchers. And even though my Packers have always had a suspect defense, I've never felt like, oh, that Matt Stafford, he's going to take over the game and he's going to put up points, and the Packers need to be absolutely perfect to beat this guy. Matt Stafford has 23 career pick sixes. 23. That's 7th all time. The guy throws 10 plus interceptions every year. He hasn't thrown for over 30 touchdowns in several years. I think, there might be some people that take offense to this, but if Matt Stafford didn't have the pedigree of being a former number 1 pick, he's really no different than someone like Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr, who over the last 5 years, those guys have almost identical statistics. So I think this is a worthwhile trade for the Rams. Don't get me wrong, but you're already seeing the chatter that the Rams are poised to be NFC favorites next year. Bovada has them as the second best Super Bowl odds in the entire league. They're tied with the Packers and the Bills, and I think there's another team in the mix, maybe the Buccaneers, at 12-1. And I just don't see it. They were a 10-win team last year. They'll have an upgrade at quarterback, but like Bob said, hey, buddy. Like Bob said, I think that defense is going to decline a little bit. They're an older roster, Stafford's 33, Aaron Donald's 30. This is not a young team. I think they have questions along the offensive line. So, listen, if you're a Rams fan, you should absolutely be excited about this deal. Stafford is 100% an upgrade over Jared Goff. But I think this team is still a step below the real contenders for the Super Bowl next year. And people are overhyping this team already. So I'm really excited for a summer's worth of, hey, the Rams, they're the team to beat. I don't see it. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't know.
No, I agree with you, Justin. I think the Packers are still the best team in the NFC.
Hey, I didn't say
And-
that. I didn't say that, Chris.
No. I know you didn't. I'm just saying that right now, I think that, even though obviously they lost to Tampa Bay last weekend, I mean, I still think the Packers on paper are the best team in the NFC. And, the Rams, I think they're in a win now mode. They know that defense is as good as it's going to get. It's not going to stay that good forever. They need to do something to get the offense going. And this is you're trading for a veteran, a 33-year-old who's had back issues. It's risky, but it's one of those moves that you're like, okay, we've got to do something. So that's what they did. So, all right, our last part of the show is going to be questions for Bob, and I'm going to kick it off. I've got two questions. The first question is, obviously, Bob, you broadcast the season opener with New England and Miami, which was a 21-11 New England victory. Cam Newton looked pretty good. And then the second game, I can't remember the final score, but Miami came back and won that game. Change of quarterbacks for the Dolphins between those two games, from Fitzpatrick to Tua. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts about Tua, how he looked to you when you saw him play. And, obviously there's already talk about maybe the Dolphins trading for Deshaun Watson. Do you think Tua is the answer for the Dolphins at starting quarterback?
Well, I think if the Dolphins have an opportunity to get Deshaun Watson, then the Miami Dolphins will have an enormous upgrade at quarterback. I don't think there are too many quarterbacks in the league better than Deshaun Watson. In fact, having watched him particularly the last two seasons against the Patriots, to me, there's Mahomes right now in the AFC, and then there's Watson when it comes to ability to affect a game. Unfortunately for him, the Houston situation is a complete debacle. With Tua, Chris, I'll be honest with you. I thought the Dolphins really managed that second game pretty well. The Patriots again were complicit in that game. I think Miami's to me the story for the Dolphins this year, as the season went along, was how well their defense played. And the Patriots, by the time they met the Dolphins, what was it, week 15? Week 15. At that point in time, the Patriots offense was so anemic. To me, that particular game was hard to get a real read on who the Dolphins were. I thought the Dolphins were bound for the playoffs at that point. And I think that, to me, Tua, there are reasons to really question, in my opinion, how far Tua can take that team, particularly given where he was drafted. I think the stature, I think there are just certain things about the ball coming out of his hand. He's an accurate passer, but to me, there were just certain things in watching him in college and then in particular, again, very, very briefly seeing him this year in the NFL, that I think the Dolphins, I don't know how long the leash will be for him. And they're in a great position now where they have so many draft picks. And obviously they've got that Texans pick in the first round this year that nothing would surprise me if Miami, puts together a package to go after another quarterback. I would be surprised if Nick Caserio made a deal with a team in the AFC East, frankly, as the general manager of the Texans. And I still think that Houston's going to try to play the long game with Watson, as bad as it looks right now, to keep him there. But I wasn't I'm not somebody that really doubted Tua coming in, but I think he's got a long way to go. But he was just a rookie, and he didn't play a full season as the starting quarterback.
A lot of Dolphin fans say that he needs more weapons, and I agree with them. I think that obviously having a top-notch wide
no question about it. They didn't have Gesicki, they didn't have Parker that second game against the Patriots. They were really beat up. I mean, those two guys at full strength are good players, and Fitzpatrick certainly relied on them a great deal. But when the Patriots played the Dolphins, I mean, Miami's team, as you well know, in that game. I mean, we saw the great Isaiah Ford, who the Patriots traded for and never activated, play against the Patriots and contribute in that game. So he didn't have much around him from that standpoint. And I think the Dolphins, they're going to upgrade their offensive line. They've made some moves the last couple of years to shore some things up, but they had that one-year guy at center in Ted Karras, a guy that I love as a former Patriot. But I wouldn't be surprised if Miami looks to stock up on the interior of the offensive line in this coming draft and strengthen the team around the quarterback. Wide receiver, certainly Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, any one of those guys, or some of the others. It's a wide receiver class that's loaded. So I wouldn't be surprised if Miami does have those weapons.
Thanks, Bob. I have a Patriots question for you. Do you think there could be a reunion with Jimmy Garoppolo coming back to Foxborough?
To me, that's the best bet for the Patriots right now, given the quarterbacks that potentially could be on the move. Because I think that, San Francisco, while they've committed to Jimmy in word this offseason, certainly I think that they're a team that has shown signs of looking for an upgrade. I don't know that there will be one available to them with the resources they have to try to acquire that quarterback. They're in a bit of a cap bind, as well as the fact that, I don't know if they're going to be able to package. Again, if Watson is available, Watson is the guy. If you're able to put together a package for him, Kirk Cousins is a guy that a lot of people feel is on their radar. There have been rumors about him because of his connection to Kyle Shanahan from Washington. I don't know, though, that Kirk Cousins, even with his statistics, with his numbers, represents an upgrade over Jimmy Garoppolo, with the exception of the durability that he has shown. But I think Garoppolo's leadership and his popularity in the San Francisco locker room is something that he definitely has going for him. With regard to the Patriots, though, they're in a real bind. They're picking 15th. It's a spot where it's almost impossible to get a quarterback who can come in and become your starting quarterback. The top 12, it's really the top 5 in general. Top 12, Mahomes and Watson are two guys that, were taken outside of that top 9. I think when Mahomes was 10, Watson was 12. But, it's, to me, where the Patriots are 15, it's really difficult in that spot unless you can trade up to get a quarterback. I don't know who outside of Lawrence and maybe Wilson this year, are guys that, you definitely look at and say, boy, this guy, there's no doubt this guy can play quarterback in the NFL. I think there are questions about Justin Fields. I think there are questions about Trey Lance, Kyle Trask. Mac Jones, to me, 15 is too high to take that quarterback out of Alabama. We'll see. So the best bet for the Patriots is if San Francisco goes out and gets another quarterback, the price the Pats would have to pay to get Garoppolo is probably a lot less than certainly what the Rams paid, probably, and what anybody's going to pay for Watson, probably less than, if Derek Carr gets traded by the Raiders, what they pay. So I think there's a real good possibility that he can come in, he knows the system, knows the offense, and he would be the bridge guy to the next quarterback they look to develop down the road.
Thanks, Bob. Justin, you're up next.
Well, Bob, I'd like to formally apologize on behalf of the Citizen Sports Weekly that you had to answer and talk about the Dolphins. Chris tries so hard to make the Dolphins relevant in February. He knows that they'll never actually be in the Super Bowl, so he has to, unfortunately, invite you onto the show only to ask you questions about the team. So I'm sorry about that. We try not to talk about the Dolphins too much on this show because we like talking about interesting football teams. Obviously, they are not one of them. My question for you, obviously, we're not accustomed to seeing the Patriots have the kind of season that they did this year. Tom Brady's, the big absence, obviously, but they did have a lot of other guys opt out of the season for COVID, opting out because of that. I'm just curious, what did you learn about Bill Belichick this year, seeing him kind of have to operate a team that wasn't at full strength like you guys are accustomed to?
Well, Justin, thank you. Chris knows that as a kid in Auburn, I was a Dolphins fan. So, I'm happy to revisit the early to mid 70s Dolphins. And as highly as I think of Brian Flores and some of the coaches down in Miami, I'd rather talk about, the Patriots, for example. But in talking about the Patriots, one of the things I try to avoid altogether is the hottest topic in these parts, and that's the Brady-Belichick narrative. And Belichick and his importance to the success of the Patriots versus Brady and his importance to the success of the Patriots. Just today on social media, I said it was a waste of time for me to think about the Brady versus Belichick narrative. But obviously it's a hot topic here because of the season the Patriots had, finishing 9-7 without Tom Brady. But as you noted, they had the highest number of players who opted out this year during the COVID pandemic, 8, including really the linchpin of their defense up front, Dante Hightower. I think a very underrated player in the NFL. But at the same time, he also represents one of the challenges for the Patriots in moving forward because it's an aging nucleus. It's an old roster. They had the oldest roster in the league last year. And in transitioning, they also were doing it without Brady, without, frankly, a suitable NFL tight end to be a reliable pass catcher. They haven't had that for a couple of years. Without enough weapons at the wide receiver position. Julian Edelman got hurt early this year, had the knee surgery after the San Francisco game, and by the midseason point, he was lost for the rest of the year. And beyond, a free agent, a college free agent in his second season as a former quarterback converted to wide receiver in North Carolina State, Jacoby Myers. It was a position at wide receiver that just didn't give them much. And of course, Cam Newton really struggled mightily in every way. In trying to gain command of the offense, didn't sign until July. They were a different type of offense too when they faced the Dolphins in week 1. It was a game in which Newton ran the ball quite a bit, and by the end of the year, opposing teams they dared the Patriots to pass and they couldn't. They didn't hit on high percentage throws. They had made a lot of mistakes. Talk about pick sixes. There were those, including one in the Rams game. Late in the season when they were still holding on to slim hopes to try to make a playoff run. So I look at the circumstances of COVID, the absence of being on the field in the spring, truncated training camp. Belichick is a teacher first and foremost, and he also had to overcome a lot of staff losses. They lost a lot of coaches over the last couple of years. Now, all those sound like excuses, opt-outs, older players, injuries. Everybody was dealing with the same circumstances in COVID. The Patriots missed a lot of practice time early in the year too because they had an outbreak on the team, forced the postponement of their game against Tampa Bay and nearly the postponement of the game before that against Kansas City. So a lot of different factors involved, but there were a lot of uncharacteristic things we saw from the Patriots, things you don't expect to see from Belichick teams this year. Personnel management, 12 guys on the field. You don't expect to see that from a Bill Belichick team. And we saw that more than once this year. Other uncharacteristic mistakes when it came to situational football. Now, I don't know if that spoke to a lot of the players who were out there specifically, or if it was more that Bill wasn't the same coach. I think he's still the best coach in the game. To me, I think that they are far away in one sense because I've talked about tight end, wide receiver. Very, very suspect against the run this year. The front seven, they lost a lot in free agency last year, including some guys who went to Miami. But at the same time, I think with Belichick, they can address some of those areas this year. They had a lot of cap room, particularly tight end, wide receiver. They didn't have a lot of time on the field last year. He's a great developer of players. There's nobody better at it. When Trey Flowers was a rookie, nobody heard of him. He played in one game. By the end of his tenure as a Patriot, he was due for a big contract in free agency, and he got it from the Detroit Lions. And we see that with a lot of guys that come through the Foxborough pipeline. So in my long-winded attempt to try to answer your question, I think it was a down year for Belichick in a lot of respects. But the team, under those circumstances, still competed and played hard. And it was quite remarkable, frankly, that they were 7-9 when you consider all the deficiencies they had and a lot of the things that they went through as a football team with who they had to go through those experiences as a football team. So I wouldn't be surprised if they make a couple of moves in free agency, develop some of the players who were non-contributors last year as they make the jump from year 1 to year 2. And if they can identify and acquire that quarterback like a Garoppolo, that this is a team, they're not ready to contend for the Super Bowl, but they could be a wild card next year and be ready to be back in the mix within a couple of years.
Justin, you have any other questions for Bob?
Yeah, just one more quick one, Bob. Are you surprised at kind of where Cam Newton landed at the end of the season? Because I remember like you mentioned the week 1 game when He was looking really good running the ball. And then I think it was week 2 when they played Sunday night at Seattle, and Patriots offense looked like awesome. And Newton was running the ball. He was slinging it. His arm looked really strong. It looked really accurate. It was like the best I had seen him play in at least 3 years, maybe even going back to his MVP season. Are you surprised? And obviously he went on the COVID list, I think, for a few weeks. Are you surprised that ultimately where he ended up this season after what seemed like a really exciting start?
Yeah, Justin, I was, because you're right. After the Seattle game, there was a lot of excitement here. People thought, wow, they might have something. It was a different kind of offense. And Julian Edelman had his greatest production when it came to receiving yards in the game against Seattle. But Newton had the bout with COVID shortly after that. In fact, he missed the next game against Kansas City. And then it was the Denver game when the Patriots and the Broncos had to postpone it until the following week. I think that, as the year went along, you could see a lack of confidence. You could see a lot of indecisiveness on his part. The mechanics, which have never been textbook with Cam Newton, they were really in disarray as the year went along. And I was an avid. He was very well respected by his teammates, very popular with his teammates. They voted him a captain. Showed a lot of leadership all season long, a lot of toughness. He was accountable. He was accessible. I've heard nothing but great things about Cam Newton as a person in the Patriot structure. But by the end of the season, as I said earlier, it was an anemic offense. I played well the last week against the Jets, but obviously that was the Jets in the final game for Adam Gase and, the interim defensive coordinator at that point. But I think that, it was a surprise to me. I say that also with, in my opinion, a possibility that Cam Newton could be back here. We're talking about Jimmy Garoppolo potentially for the Patriots. But a lot of things have to fall in place for that to happen. And then what are your choices in free agency? Might we see Fitzpatrick? He didn't rule that out when he was asked about Matthew Stafford not wanting to play in New England. Fitz said, I can't be that picky. So he's played for everybody else in the AFC East. Why not the Patriots, perhaps? But I look at other guys like Tyrod Taylor, potentially, Mitchell Trubisky, who I wouldn't rule out for the Patriots. But I think, there's a possibility if things don't fall right for them, the Cam Newton could be the bridge quarterback, and they look to draft and develop a QB come April.
All right, Robert, your turn.
Yeah. I got a couple questions for you, Bob. First, I wanted to get your thoughts on what goes into preparation as a broadcaster for the Super Bowl, just given your experience on that front. I know that you hear from players all the time that they try to treat it like another game, but it's obviously not another game. So what's the preparation like, and what's that experience like as a radio broadcaster to call obviously the biggest game of the year?
You know what, Robert? One of the things I did before the first Super Bowl and repeated it for the next few that I've been able to do, is I took a cue from the Patriots players and coaches, because one of the things that they had stressed going into Super Bowl 49 is that with the 2 weeks between the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl itself, you try to get as much done as possible that week you're home in Foxborough. You put all, you let somebody handle all the ticket requests so you don't have to deal with all the distractions, talking about the players and so forth. The game plan, they put almost all of it in place before they leave for the Super Bowl site. So from my standpoint, my approach was to, and I apologize for the noise in the background, guys. A 9 and a 10-year-old can only be expected not to contain themselves for so long. They're fighting over Minecraft. But this is the kind of distractions and the noise that you face when you travel to the Super Bowl site. But from my standpoint, again, it was about try to get all the paperwork done, because I do charts on each play. I have a big poster board, it's a spotters chart with notes and statistics, information on every player, on the depth chart, and it's arranged so that the Patriots offense is on one side against, say, the Seahawks defense. You flip it over, Seahawks offense against the Patriots defense. Try to get all that stuff done the week before while we're still based in Foxborough, because when we get out to the Super Bowl, you want to enjoy the experience, number one. Two, you're probably going to be in a rat race, which was what I experienced. because there's so many media availabilities and so many things that are ongoing throughout the week. And it's really hard because you're not in one place for any one long period of time, maybe the media center. But it's really difficult to concentrate and focus on preparation during that week. And so I always try to use that week to kind of complement what I had done. You do a lot of interviews, you watch some more video, you try to soak up the experience and appreciate the opportunity, because it's ridiculous to think that you can go to more than one Super Bowl. And in my case, to have gone to 4 in my first 7 seasons, 6 seasons, actually, the first 6 seasons, 4 Super Bowls. I just completed my 8th season overall. That's absurd. So for me, again, the preparation is the same. And once you start calling the game, honestly, you get into the game after the first play, with exception of the long breaks and the long halftime, and you actually enjoy the halftime show. It is the same when the ball's in play. It is the same. And to me, you have a job. Describe what's happening. Note the down, the distance, the time, who's winning, what the score is, and go back to the basics of broadcasting. But you do know, obviously, that there are greater implications to this game. And if you screw it up, that everybody's going to hear it, because Super Bowl calls live in immortality. And so for me, that was always a focus. But more, like I said, from the actual standpoint of calling the game, much like playing it, and you hear them talk about it, the players, the coaches, it is really similar. You try not to think of it as something other than that once you get into the game.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is the, I know that I think you mentioned it, the whole thing with Stafford, not wanting to go to New England, and that led to a discussion about the Patriot way. And, it seemed that there could be some misconceptions there. I don't know how you feel about it, but, just hearing the way it talks, like, it's almost like it's synonymous with not being player friendly, essentially, that, if you go to New England, it's not going to be fun. It's not where you're going to want to spend your time, even though obviously Belichick has had this, this great success, with New England, unprecedented success, obviously. So, do you think that there are misconceptions about what the Patriot way actually means? Because it even seems that, I heard Aqib Talib on the radio recently, like he had one idea of what the Patriot way is, and then you hear some other players talk about it, and they offer a whole different, kind of perspective. So I wonder what you thought about that, and just how this whole idea of the Patriot way is viewed in the NFL and in the media, obviously.
Yeah, well, that's another subject that's gotten a lot of airtime here in this area this week, particularly after Danny Amendola on national television and radio said that the Patriot way, you see Tom Brady's picture next to it in the dictionary, that Tom Brady is the Patriots way. And since then, some former Patriot players and current Patriot players like Willie McGinnis and Devin McCourty have been asked about Danny's comments. And Danny has also tried to clarify his comments and said, that basically Bill was a great coach to play for, but Danny didn't appreciate Bill, the GM, because every year Danny had to take a pay cut while he was in New England. And ultimately the Patriots did not, make a competitive offer when Amendola left to sign with the Dolphins. And so, there are different conceptions of the Patriot way, even among Patriot players. But I think what it goes back to is a lot of what McGinnis in particular talked about, because he was here at the beginning. He was part of the transition from Bill Parcells to Pete Carroll to Bill Belichick. And what the Patriot way really is about putting team first. And, in the case of Brady, he did that from day one. He's done it with Tampa Bay. So Tom Brady embodied the Patriot way. But so did, in the early days, not only the stars like McGinnis and Teddy Bruschi, but Larry Izzo, their special teams ace of the time, just as Matthew Slater has embodied it and exemplified it here of late. And I think it's really about accountability. It's about being smart situationally. Is it a fun place to play? Well, the Patriot players will tell you it's a hard place to play. It's a very detail-oriented environment. It's very business-like. There are a lot of guys that don't appreciate it, don't like it. Reggie Wayne was famous for a short while as a Patriot. And when he came into training camp a few years ago, obviously he's acclaimed as a player in his Colts days. and a future Hall of Famer perhaps. But, he basically left after a very short period in training camp, and the word was out that he wasn't having enough fun. It was too hard, just the playbook. Brandon Cooks this week, speaking of a former Patriot and a former Ram, said if you don't like playing for the Patriots, you just don't like working hard. And I think that it's a hard place to play too, because the expectations are so great and the fans and the media demand so much. As we saw this year, one hiccup, 7-9, missed the playoffs for the first time since 2008, and it was an abysmal failure. So it's difficult in a lot of ways. Some people think you can't be an individual, you can't have personality or show personality, but guys develop brands here. Gronk certainly did. Brady did. Julian Edelman has. Other guys as well. But at the same time, maybe they're not given the latitude and the freedom as in other places. Now, I also have to say, too, that a lot of people that really have been with Belichick and the Patriots from day one, when he took over as the head coach and the personnel chief, they cringe at the mention of the Patriot way. Because I think a lot of them have so much respect for other coaches and organizations around the league that really stress the same things. Again, maybe it's a little bit different. You don't hear the Patriot players offer bulletin board material. It's very rare if that happens. Is that part of the Patriot way? Is that part of Belichick way? Yeah. I mean, Wes Welker got benched at the start of a game in the playoffs because he joked about Rex Ryan's foot fetish in the week leading up to the game, and the Patriots lost, and so I mean, is that going to happen anywhere else? Probably not. But and when other coaches go elsewhere too, I think that's what really shines light on some of those misconceptions. The problem with Matt Patricia going to Detroit and trying to operate the Patriot way wasn't that a lot of the things, in my opinion, that a lot of the things that he tried to achieve there were misguided. It's just that Matt Patricia was trying to be like Bill Belichick, and it can't be. Only Bill Belichick can coach like Belichick. And I think that's where Flores is so good, Chris, in Miami, because he has done a lot of those things, but at the same time, there's a sense that team really loves playing for him, and they, and I think you can achieve both. I think that to me, like the Patriot way, it's not stifling individuality and personality, which a lot of people get carried away with. It's just about be accountable, be smart, be tough, respond with poise under pressure. And nobody did that better than Brady, as I said, but there are a lot of other guys that, embodied that as well for a long time.
Good. All right, guys, you ready to wrap it up?
Sure.
All right, Bob, can't say thank you enough for joining us. We appreciate it. Don't worry about the kids. That's the joys of having children. You get all that. That's because they do grow, as they grow fast. And I've got two now, and they're 20 and 19. And there's a part of me kind of misses the days of them being smaller and all that joyful noise. So,
yeah, don't worry, Bob. We have to deal with Chris's screeching after every Dolphins loss on the video every week. So this is nothing for us. This is a joy for us.
You're exaggerating, Bob. You do know that. But
I've been in that newsroom on Dill Street before. I know what it gets like late at night before the paper goes to press. So,
yeah, Bob, again, thank you very much. We appreciate your time, and obviously, off season's coming up and the draft. Maybe we'll have you on sometime in May after the draft, and we can discuss the off season, how the teams are doing, and everything. And again, we just appreciate your time. It's been great to have you with us, and we hope you guys stay safe and healthy out there in Massachusetts, and we'll see you soon. So, Robert, Justin, it's going to be a fun Super Bowl, and to all the viewers out there that have tuned in, especially the ones that, from Auburn, that maybe went to high school with Bob and me or are Auburn natives. Thanks for tuning in, and guys, we'll do a Super Bowl wrap up next week. Enjoy the game. Be safe.
Guys, thank you so much. Best to everybody. Thank you very much.